Welcome to Vision to Venture. I'm Eddie, and I'm here to uncover the realities of scaling and building a tech startup. Each week, I speak to leaders within the tech space with their insights and advice on how to found, fund, and frame a tech startup. So make sure to follow and subscribe to never miss an episode. Welcome back to another episode of Vision to Venture. Today I'm joined by Xavier Parkhouse Parker, who is the COO of Cambridge Future Tech, who is a tech venture builder with a vision to help next generation deep tech startups. Xavier has led several startups within areas such as AI, media, marketing and HR tech. Hey Xavier, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
How are you?
I'm great.
Grand. Good to hear it. Travelled all the way from Cambridge on those ruddy trains. So just to start, do you want to just tell us a little bit more about your background and your journey and how you sort of got into venture building?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my background has always been as effectively as an entrepreneur and founder. I founded my first company unofficially when I was 16, doing some Amazon stuff, and then properly when I was an undergrad. I founded two companies in my second year. One that was a magazine, student magazine, that actually did pretty well. We managed to sell the company on and the project on to another group of students. We interviewed Sir Richard Branson, the CEO of Unilever, a couple of famous entrepreneurs and founders and things like that. And I also co-founded Plato, which started off as a ideas management tool, but it then became a HR and recruitment AI tool for optimizing and sifting and recommending candidates and for job roles within large corporates. We raised some money for that. It then failed. I was still 21, 22 at the time. Didn't really know what I was doing, managing a team of people who were mostly older than me and more experienced, but it was a lot of fun running Plato. I then, with one of my co-founders from that, jumped into founding ZapHub, which was a marketing technology company. We were doing some marketing side of things in terms of agency aspects, but we were also building a technology platform. And then we fell into the trap of, we're just going to go after money and we're going to go and just get more clients and focus on the agency and not focus on the technology, which to me was just not interesting. It was getting boring, getting stale. I think for the last 6 months I was there, I realised I didn't actually want to be there. I then left in December 2019 and left on good terms. They're still good friends. We still work with them, but it was one of those things where I just went, okay, this isn't for me. I want to focus on technology. At the same time as this, I was doing my master's at Cambridge in entrepreneurship and innovation, which is where I met my current co-founder, Owen. So Owen and I were on the same course. His background, he was a Typhoon fighter pilot for 14 years, left the military, and then decided, I think I might be interested in founding a company. So he joined business school with me. So we met there. Wow. We got together as friends on the first day. Yeah. And we sort of ended up meeting in the pub and being the last people there, which is
that's always the way.
Probably still the same now. Like, what's that? 5 years on.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. So that was great. And then when I left ZapHub, Owen said to me, "Look, I've got this luxury watch licensing company. We're sponsoring England rugby. We're doing all this stuff. It's a lot of fun. Don't think it's going to be that big a business, but it's a lot of fun. Do you want to just come and run this? Because I know you've just quit ZapHub. Do you want to do something else?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I did that from March of that year. Then COVID hit, and all of our plans went awry because we're doing all these events, and we needed to go to the US and all of this stuff, and that all just got completely put a pin in it. And by this point as well, I'd automated almost everything in that business, so it was running on its own. So we just had time. He was currently in his day job at BAE Systems at the time, looking for a route to quit, to be honest, which was a lot of where this came from. And with this Oxbridge Watches company, it was just ticking along. It wasn't interesting. So we sat around and goes, what are we interested in? What things have we come across that we think we can do? What experience do we have? And at the same time, especially in COVID, we were doing lots of mentoring with a lot of the programs around Cambridge, so Impulse, Ignite, Accelerate, all of these programs that were helping academics, founders, innovators, technologists create companies out of the things they've developed. The only problem is that they'd go through these programs and they're all really good, and they'd focus on different things. They're great at like the education part, and they can connect with a couple of mentors and things like this. But what they didn't do is help them found companies. So we'd come out of the back of these things. They'd go, okay, we've done this demo day, great, and then they'd come to us and go, great, what do I do now? I need to start a company. What do I do? How do I help? Can you be my co-founder? Can you? And we realised that actually what continues to happen is academics would create something really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, there's some things that sound interesting that aren't. There's some things that have market potential that don't. That's a whole other area. But the fundamentals at this point was they're creating things that should be companies, and yet they're not, and then they go and get a job somewhere and they never do it, and that technology sits on the shelf, might get licensed, it probably won't, and nothing ever happens to it. And that's where the Cambridge Future Tech really came from, is that me and Owen were like, right, we think we can go and build this. We looked at consulting, we looked at an accelerator, we looked at some form of pre-seed fund at this time, we looked at all of these different routes, and we then realised, no, the venture building model, which is something that I'd always been interested in since I ran the Entrepreneurship Society at Southampton for my undergrad, and I was talking to a lot of people about it, and it's always been interesting because I've always thought it's a good concept.
Okay.
And it sort of fell back into that, and we went, okay, let's go and talk to as many people as possible. So we were like, right, let's sign up for this, let's go and get feedback on it. And we started, I remember the first pitch deck we had, it was horrible, it was black and yellow, no, it was blue and yellow, it was awful, it was a really awful deck. We looked at it at this retreat we did in the summer, and it was really interesting to see where some of the little gems of what Cambridge Future Tech's become from that were in, but very little. It's completely different. And what we did is, and we went through hundreds of iterations of this business plan, which was a pitch deck, by just feedback meeting. Okay, this is interesting. You know, we're not taking everyone's advice, and I definitely don't recommend people do that, but we took people's advice and we adapted, we improved, and that's where Cambridge Future Tech came out. So that was, October, November, December 2020, and then we raised some money last year.
Nice.
So we made some money the year after that, so 21. Then we raised more money this year. We've now a team of 10 full-time, 4 part-time, 5 part-time, depends what day of the week it is, to be honest. So I'm losing track. But anyway, yeah, we're growing, and we've got 10 companies in the portfolio at the moment, soon to be 11 or 12. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll see. So that's where we are.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. So it seems like it's growing in the right direction. This episode is sponsored by DS Group. DS Group help connect machine learning and software engineering talent with groundbreaking opportunities in the field of AI. So whether you're a company searching for exceptional tech talent or an individual seeking that perfect role, DS Group is your go-to solution. Thanks to DS Group for sponsoring Vision to Venture. But obviously there's you guys, the venture builders, and the traditional venture capitalists. How does the concept of venture building differ from venture capital, and why is it valuable to some startups?
It's a great question. Question we get asked quite often, actually. So, like, from a fundamental point, actually, from some fundamental aspects, we're very similar. I mean, we assess deals, projects, companies in a very similar way. We like things that are going into big markets. We like things that have the potential to be big, companies. It's almost cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. We are assessing companies on the basis that we believe fundamentally they have the potential to have a valuation of above $1 billion. So they have the potential to become unicorns. Mm-hmm. Those things are all very similar. We do due diligence in the same way, we structure in the same way. Our returns are similar, not the same, but similar in terms of how we get paid, our valuation model, all of this stuff, that's all similar. Where we differ is fundamentally, to start with, we don't put capital in, we build the companies. We are actually mostly the company to start with. So when a company gets formed, it's coming out of, for example, one of the companies, Mignon, was coming out of Newcastle University. When that for the first, year of that company, pretty much the entire company was Cambridge Future Tech, with the academics as advisors and consultants. Now, that's not to detract from them. They are full-time academics. At the time they weren't even really meant to be doing more than a couple of hours a week, and they were to a greater or lesser extent, getting involved, but they were just advisors at this point, helping us spin this out. And we were building customer relationships, building finance relationships, structuring the plans, structuring this, building in the team. We got the first funding in and the grant funding, and then the company becomes itself. We actually led the investment round into that one as well, and that's currently at 980,000, I think, plus or minus 10k. I need to go and check the numbers on that. But it's and that's a pre-seed round, looking to close that up to 2.5 million by the end of Q1 next year. So, but we are the company, and I think that's the big thing, is that we build these things. Now we're not building the technology. In that case, the technology was built by 2 academics and an entire research group, and still is. In fact, in all cases, it's built by other people. We don't do the technology, but we do everything else around it when the company's getting started. And then as the first capital comes in and the team are in place, we start to take a slow step back where we become more like in some sense, VC, but we still have a lot more support that we have. The companies have access to our market research team and our finance teams, and I don't know, whatever else, customer relationships, all of these different things. We'll also bring in our network of like mentors and advisors, which is, 100, 200 people at this point, and that come and support these companies and help them out basically. And then the other thing which is the bit that I spend a lot of my time doing, because within our corporate structure, I sort of mainly run the venture builder, and this is the bit I enjoy, is really just kind of helping founders and talking to them and being like, sometimes it's shoulder to cry and sometimes it's just, this is really bloody hard, what can I do here? Or they've got questions and things like that, and there's a bit of that, a little bit of accountability. When something goes wrong, they won't go and tell their VCs, they won't go and tell their investors, but they will go and tell us. And then we can help to fix it. And maybe we'll talk to the investors on their behalf and say, by the way, there's something going on here. This grant didn't happen, or this problem's, whatever it is. Something might not have happened, but they'll come to us and we can go and fix it. And that's what I like, that when our companies get more and more developed, I think we'll continue to be that port of call when these things happen.
You're that helping hand.
Exactly. And that's the bit I find the most fun.
Yeah.
So,
So obviously there's the entire process, and it sounds like you have a lot to do with this process of obviously building the companies. I understand you have a lot of involvement, but when it comes to these startups that you provide capital, after you have provided capital, how do you then add value? Obviously I know that you've got all of those resources, but what is it that you do from the start with these companies once they've brought this technology to you? So
from the start, and it's really important to reiterate this, that there is no cookie cutter approach.
Of course.
I mean, there are programs that are programmatic and they're cohort, start, finish, this. We don't work like that at all. So there's not one size fits all. It's really hard to say how that looks.
Different.
It's always different. So, sometimes, like, for example, we've got a company, Safe Systems, that's making autonomous systems more safe in terms of, like, effectively safety systems for, like, drones and autonomous vehicles and all of these things. It makes AI trustworthy and safe. So with them, it was a case of actually, we need to really refine. So they came from understanding the problem and understanding the technology, but it was really refine, what are you actually going to sell?
Yeah.
What does this product look like to your customers, and who are those customers? So it was really about just refining that business model. They knew the tech, they knew the problem space, they knew actually their market, weirdly, because they're selling into the aerospace market. They know that really well, but they didn't know what they were selling. That's the point. They said, right, we've got all of this that we're doing. We can do this. We've got this bit of tech. We can do this. Blah blah blah. And it was like, what are we actually going to sell?
There was so much,
and that's the point. It was like, let's just refine down. Let's get one point. And they're really great founders, and I love this about them. But it is sometimes quite hard work. Is that they'll just go, right, we can do this. And I remember we were walking between meetings, and they'd created a whole new business model. And I was like, guys, let's just get one. Let's get on with it. Now they've
Focus
got
on
to
the
that
one
point.
thing.
So that was a big thing. We started helping with them, and now they've got their first grant funding in. They're going for a funding round at the moment, so we're working on that, probably starting the beginning of next year. So there's that. With some companies, they know what they're going to sell. They just need help building the team or the fundraising, or they don't really understand what their pricing model is and things like this. What that actually looks like depends. Then there's all the legal aspects, and very few companies are good at this. In fact, it doesn't matter what stage they're at, they're always pretty awful. Legal aspects and governance and things like this. And actually that's something that's becoming a really big plus, is when investors invest in our portfolio, they're like, and someone actually said this today, I've never seen companies at your stage have such good governance. Like, there are so little problems we have to fix. And this is at like C+, which is like great. I was like, well, good. I mean, governance is boring, but it's really important, and it's one of the things that we focus on. So there's a lot of things. It really depends on the company, but we basically do what it takes and whatever we can to make those companies successful. Once they get through our DD process, and actually even before they finish the entire process, and we're already into the build phase, we're basically doing whatever we can to make it work and deploying resource where we can to make the company work.
So you're obviously doing all of this, and let's face it, it's a competitive market at the moment, and everything's just very up and down. What would you say are like the biggest challenges that founders tend to face, and how would you sort of assist them and guide them to overcome them?
That's a really good question. So the biggest challenges, I mean, from a very surface level, it's always going to be capital. Capital and sales, and they're two sides of the same coin. You need to raise capital, you need to sell things. A really good VC friend of mine, Kian from Shore Valley, he was doing a panel at one of our events recently, and he said sales solves everything. And I think that that's the case. All the problems you have in your business happen that way. Raising capital is easier if you've got sales, all of these things. So I'd say the biggest challenge that founders have is to get out there and actually sell and overcome the wall that you have to do this. Now, I say this coming from deep tech, where there often isn't something to sell, but that's not true. You can sell the concept, you can sell the ideas and things like this. The more customer engagement you have, the better the company's going to be. So founders, it's a self-inflicted challenge, I'd say, is that they need to overcome that, and they need to just get out there and actually sell things. And I'm not saying this because I hated doing that at Zap. I mean, I did it, but it wasn't fun. But to start with, you need to do founder-led sales. In the sort of business that we have that's commercial, the consulting part, we've had to go out and do that, and it is a barrier sometimes to overcome, but it's important.
But it happens.
Yeah.
And it's something you have to get over.
Exactly.
But at least you're there to assist with that.
And exactly. Well, that's the thing. We help with the sales. And that's the thing. I don't want to do the sales on their behalf. And that's one of our challenges, is that we don't want to do too much for them, so they don't learn to strengthen those muscles themselves. So we've got one company. They are struggling to get over their own barrier to the selling process, despite the fact that once they get into meetings, they're fantastic and they close deals. So there's that. Yeah.
It helps that you're just, it's more of like a sort of push. It's like, this is what you need to do. Now do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so obviously I'm sure that you get, God knows how many people come to you with obviously these ideas and these propositions. How would you sort of identify and evaluate promising tech startups, ideas, and people that come to you with these obviously these products or these technologies? What are the key things that you look for when you want to obviously invest in a company, and is there any like specific criteria or qualities?
So I mean, we have a very full process for due diligence and things. I mean, fundamentally and there's a better answer to this, but fundamentally from our point of view, it needs to be deep tech. We're technology first. The tech has to be interesting. So we come at this from the tech first, going, okay, the tech needs to be good, and then we can work out the other aspects. But I'd say there's 40s to what it really looks like. So that's team, traction, TAM, total addressable market, and technology. Yeah, that is the four. So the team needs to be good backgrounds, capable. Even though we're often building the teams, the academics and people around it need to be credible. They need to be good at working together. They need to be coachable, and I cannot stress that enough. Coachability is fundamentally the most important aspect of this, because there are, and I'm not saying that we know better. In some things we definitely do, but not in all things. And I don't think anyone knows the best way of doing things. But if people are unable to learn and develop, then there's no point starting a company, because you hit a wall really early.
They're not going to retain what
they're not going to do it. I mean, there's the idea that you need to just be belligerent and arrogant and all that stuff to found companies, and that's just don't do that.
Yeah.
So I'd say team is really important. I mean, also things like egoless ambition and all of that is really important. But often that's because a lot of the time we're bringing in CEOs. That's maybe not the same thing. Like for us, the academics need to be coachable. They need to be able to understand that it's not academia, this is commercial. So there's a different way of thinking about things. And there's some that have developed so well, and there's Alex Yakovlev, who's from Mignon. He's developed so well at being able to understand the commercial aspects of it really well. So that's really great to see. For someone who's in his 60s and as a professor for the last 30 years, it's been really interesting to see. And I'd say that's good. TAM, I'll talk about this because it's very brief. Needs to be a big market. 100 million is a tiny market. 1 billion is a tiny market. Needs to be really 10 billion to 100 billion plus in terms of market size. Otherwise, you can't have a company that's worth $1 billion. That's a really short one. What that looks like, I can talk about for a bit, and then I can pass you to my research director, James, who will talk about this for an hour and a half about how to do market analysis. And probably an hour and a half will only get him started on the introduction. Traction. Demonstrating, it's not so relevant for us because we're super early stage, but traction, demonstrating that people care about this. If this thing exists, would they pay for it? If this thing exists, would they work with it? Do they care? All of that. And what was the last one? Technology. Oh yeah, the technology needs to be cool. It needs to be cool. It needs to be different, defensible, different, interesting, and then fit all the other points.
Obviously, there's a lot of misconceptions in the tech startup world. What are some of the sort of common misconceptions to that you would want to disprove for aspiring founders and aspiring entrepreneurs out there?
So I think, and I sort of touched on it a little bit, is the assumption that I think people and there's some awful people in this space, people like Elon Musk, and I don't know, Stephen Bartlett, who has a false persona, and people like that. There's a lot of people like that where I think there's this level of ego and arrogance, and there's a lot of that, and people think that's what I need. And the problem is that a lot of this I think has stemmed from Steve Jobs, and there's a really great quote I think from one of the founders of Google about Steve Jobs saying, Steve Jobs was great for Steve Jobs. Don't try and be like that. And I think that has made people think you need to be arrogant and brash and reality distortion and all of these things. That worked for one company with one CEO once. It doesn't work over and over again. And there's this concept that these founders need to be really ego driven, and that is so wrong. I was yesterday at an event talking to one of the founders of ARM, Jamie Urquhart, who's great, and he was saying that honestly, egoless ambition, this is the phrase that I've seen him and spoken to him a lot. Egoless ambition is really important, and he was saying that Robin, the CEO of ARM, when it was founded, which is now the UK's most successful tech company, and probably has been for a while. Robin was always really ambitious. He wanted that to happen, but it was egoless ambition. It's the right kind of ambition. It's ambition for the company or the mission or the product or something like that, but not for the individuals. That is probably the biggest myth to dispel, because it is the thing that kills companies. No one wants to work with someone like that, and if you can't get people to work with you, you haven't got a company at the end of the day.
Then it just goes into arrogance.
It's arrogant, and then these people are also bullies, and they're hard to work with, and you come out of a meeting with them going, and you relax. And I know there's some people like this, and I've seen them. And I've seen what's happened with these people around and with these people not around. Everyone can just breathe freely. And everything works better. And it's so much better. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges as well, is having people like that, because they are attracted to the startup world, of course. which doesn't help. And getting rid of them, or avoiding them, or identifying them, that's a challenge. So there's a lot of things like that.
Flags.
It's just huge. I mean, it's really hard though. That is a really hard thing to pick up on, and it sometimes doesn't happen for 2 years. And you pick up on this kind of stuff. Other misconceptions as well. There's the misconception that you need to go and raise funding straight away and all this stuff and not focusing on sales. I will, even though, VCs and, equities is the space I'm in, you can build companies based on sales. And I think that's a thing that has been lost again because the way the media has portrayed it. I need to go and raise my $26 million seed round and stuff, and then do what with it and all of this stuff. But go sell. Talk to customers. Talk to customers as early as possible.
Get your name out there.
And this, exactly. Get your name out there, and you can talk to customers on day one. They might not answer the phone, or respond to an email, but you can start doing this on day one. And companies wait too long to do this, and I think that's what kills companies is they don't get enough sales, they don't get enough customer engagement. So they build products. There's a really great competitor to There's a really good example of this, which is a competitor to one of our portfolio. And what they did is they went and built this amazing technology, and it's a really cool piece of tech, but it's about 115 times more expensive than our company's product in a market which is really price sensitive, and it's also too big to function within that market. Great piece of tech, great robotics, awesome, but the customers don't care and what happened is that the team didn't go and speak to customers. They never engaged with customers, so they never got the feedback of what customers want. So they go, we've got this amazing solution. Cool, nobody cares.
I feel like that's a big thing as well, because it all kind of stems down to market research, knowing your consumers, knowing what people want, and even as little as holding a focus group could be the difference between having a great product that's obviously going to fly off the shelves or just complete failure.
Yeah, and I think that's focus group, exactly. Go and have those conversations.
So simple.
When we started CFT, like I was saying, we did 100 odd feedback sessions. And that made all the difference. And you remind me of one other misconception that I love, is don't think that doing the business stuff can't be social and things like that. Because I'd say the majority of the really good things that have happened with CFT have been started in a pub or a bar somewhere at 2:00 in the morning. Our investors, are some of our employees that we've met, the companies we brought in, the founders we brought into these things, pretty much always happen to things. It's a really good part of this, and it's something you need to remember as a founder, is that you do need to be social. You do need to build real relationships with people rather than this surface level relationship that you generally tend to have with a lot of people in the space. Is you need to try and build good relationships with people.
I have actually had conversations in the past as well with founders of companies that have literally said, started in a pub. This idea came from a pub, was in a pub at early hours of the morning. Literally what you've just said, and it is a common thing, and it's just it does make sense. I feel like most good ideas happen in a pub.
Some bad ones as well.
Oh, for sure, 100%. It's definitely a big mix. But it's always worth the risk. Just also circling back to obviously talking about just having somebody that is a founder that's just being arrogant. It's just not going to work. Obviously, that is a major red flag that you would most likely look out for. Are there any other sort of major red flags that would sort of make you think, no, this is a no-go, we can't go down this route?
So there's a lot of people ones. So it's not just the arrogance. There's like I said, the coachability, unable to be coached. I suppose that's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, true.
Sometimes there's this thing around teams where they're not really in it. They're playing at it. They're like, I'm just gonna dip my toe in a little bit, but I'm not gonna jump in all the way. And then you go, okay, well, what happens? We'll get funding in, and you'll be able to pay yourself salary from this. And then they still don't jump in and things like that. So we've started to screen for that a little bit better. And actually, the ones where that's been the case, we've managed to fix a lot of that. But it is still a case of where people don't jump in, and we've had this quite a few times where they're sort of engaged, but they're not.
Yeah.
And going back to the misconceptions, being a founder is really, really, really hard. It's the hardest, it's the best and the worst job in the world. I completely agree with that. It is on both sides of that spectrum.
Absolutely.
And if you don't go in all the way, you're going to get killed. It's not going to work. So that's something that we tend to look out for. On the other side, and the product stuff and market stuff, if the market's too small, you know, like I was saying, the market needs to be big enough. I mean, for the way when we're doing screening of potential projects, the thing that is going to be the first thing that pushes something out of the deal flow, it's going to be the market's too small. It's just market. Yeah. Because if the market doesn't fit, then there's no point building this company. So there's a big bit about that. On the tech side, it's much harder because you can adapt and improve technology.
Yeah.
If you're doing something that can't be done, so there's literally, I've heard things that are breaking the laws of physics, and I respect the ambition, but you can't break the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Breaking the laws of thermodynamics was one thing, and I was like, that is literally physically impossible. No one will ever believe you either. So there's things like that, but other than that, technology can be adapted, especially if there's some core technology that's solid, and then they come to us and go, well, this application, so the engineering isn't great. You can go, okay, fine. As long as the core's good, you can. The rest is engineering problems, and engineering problems just take time and money to fix. They're not fundamental. So
not worth the time or money.
Sometimes, yeah, but that goes back to the market. If the market's big enough, then it is worth the time and money.
But
so the argument that at the moment a lot of quantum computing isn't fundamental, some of it definitely is, but a lot of it's engineering problems, and that just requires time and money.
Yeah.
The assumption is that the market is going to be big enough. Now, I don't know how much I agree with that, but we'll see. But I flip between the two because I can see bits of the pros and I can see the negatives on quantum, but assuming that the market is big enough, and there's a lot of arguments that say it will be, then it makes sense to spend the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that are going into quantum, because the market is potentially 100, 1,000 times that.
Yeah.
If you're trying to build something that only has application for 10 people in the entire world, then there's no point.
You actually mentioned, obviously, depending on the technologies, and obviously in this world, in this space, tech and trends are just evolving rapidly. There's always new stuff. What, it was Gen AI, now it's LLMs, and it's just, there's always something new. There's always something coming about. So I guess the question for you is, how do you stay up to date with the new tech and the new trends in order to inform investment decisions?
That's a great question. How do I do it in reality is I outsource that part to my research team, to be honest, in terms of what's really interesting, what are the big things, and they talk about it. But I'd actually say that is indicative of the real way of doing this is just talking to people. Yeah. So honestly, sometimes just being in the office with all the PhDs and the scientists, people that work in that analyst team, you just pick up so much. You just hear what's going on, you can do this. And then it's going out, talking to people in the market, talking to people in customers, talking to corporates, talking to academics. There's a deep tech VC drinks thing, which happens once a quarter, and there's one today. I'm sure off the back of that, there'll be a load of great conversations about what's the big thing, going up to the other people in the space and going, what have you invested in that's interesting? What are you looking at that's interesting? And then talking about this stuff, that's where you start to see, there's this interesting thing coming through. And then beyond that, it's trying to read as much as possible. But that's much harder than talking to people. So talking to people is the best way.
It would probably be the same for me, because it's just how else do you figure it out?
Yeah. Sometimes on the train I get 10 minutes to read TechCrunch or something
literally. It's just for me, it's just LinkedIn. I'm just
sometimes
something new.
There's some great people on LinkedIn for this stuff, actually.
Absolutely,
There's a guy called Michael Jackson, who's not the musician, who's a VC, who is almost probably as famous in the deep tech VC community as the musician.
Yeah.
And his stuff is very controversial and quite funny, but also quite interesting. So, yeah.
Even so I've been in the tech space for nearly 2 years now, obviously in recruiting. And even just in the last 2 years, I feel it's changed,
especially in AI
so
recruiting.
much in AI recruiting, because it's it's like, I feel like at least every month, sometimes every week, it's just like, oh, here's a new thing. And then companies are like, oh, when we want experience in that. And it's like, it's just come out.
Well, this is the interesting thing about
how
that.
How do you keep up?
The interesting thing about that, especially in AI, is that it's all the same anyway. None of it's new, it's just new names on top of it. I was... I'm not going to go into the rant about AI regulation, but one of the things about generative AI and things like this, people are, it's brand new, we don't know how to deal with it. It's like, it's not. It was first proposed in, I think, 2017 by Google with transformer neural networks. And the concept for that is also based on something that's come before. I mean, and then going all the way back, it's still just effectively probabilistic data science, Python, all of this stuff. It is all the same.
It's all the same.
It's all deep neural networks, and then you go back before that, it's all the same anyway. So the interesting thing about AI, most of the trends are marketing. The technology trends are the same thing that have just been slowly, gradually increasing. The only big difference from that space is the marketing and the hype around it. The actual fundamental technology isn't drastically different from what it was a year ago. Now, NVIDIA will bring out a new chip, and that will help this thing, but take 18 months to do this, blah 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 blah. So that's what I'd say about the AI thing. Like, AI is important, is getting more things, but the fundamentals of it are the same. And if you can start to understand that part, and this is the other thing that kind of answers the question about the trends. If you can start to understand at least to some level of degree the actual technologies behind it, you can understand it. Now, for me, it's AI and semiconductors are the areas that I have that understanding. For others in our team, it's aerospace and synthetic biology or whatever it is. You can't do that for everything because there's too much. But you can for a couple of things, and then you can start to actually understand the trends. And that's when I say I rely on James and James's team, the research team, because it's a case of, okay, I think this is interesting. What do you guys think? And they're much better at understanding the depth of the technology and things.
And so I guess that kind of leads on to my next question, because obviously you had to mention there was specific areas that you sort of focus on. So just for any listeners out there thinking that they want to start their own tech venture, they're aspiring entrepreneurs, what would you say are areas? I guess this could go for one, you, and two, your whole company. What are there any specific areas that you focus on or that you look for that you're most interested in when it comes to obviously capital and investing in and moving forward with, I guess?
So me personally, as CFT and personally as well, I'd say my areas of interest are fundamental AI, so foundational AI, so new ways of doing artificial intelligence, new foundational models, new different approaches, these things, and then semiconductors and chip technologies, whether that's photonics or quantum chips or standard CMOS technology, anything like that. Super interesting. Memory, I think, is one of the biggest problems that we need to be solving at the moment, the von Neumann bottleneck and things like that. So there's that part. As a company, as CFT, we're interested in every sort of tech that's got some level of defensibility, some defensible moat that isn't biotech, life sciences, pharma, drug discovery, or anything like that. But we focus on digital and physical sciences. So across that relatively broad spectrum, at the very early stages, we're interested. And I'm always interested to hear from founders anyway. So I just like talking shit about starting companies. So that's it.
That's fair enough. I don't think I could do it. It's just I feel like you probably get bombarded with all these different ideas. And
I'm pretty glad that I've got a team of people that can deal with most of it. I say, cool, that sounds good. James, which person can look at this? Because at the end of the day, I know where my limitation is. If it's AI and semiconductors, I will look up to it and look into it quite a bit. We're looking at 3 chip or semiconductor things at the moment that are way beyond my level of understanding. So we've had to go even beyond the materials PhD, Maxim, that we've got in the team. So we've had to go to the experts on that one to come back. But yeah, it's I still want to learn more about them, and that's the thing.
And just to sort of wrap up, you've clearly got a lot of experience in the area and in the field, and you've been doing it for so long. If you could give just one key piece of advice to anyone listening that is obviously, hopefully in the future, wanting to start their own startup and venture, what would that be?
So it's to read a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, because there are a lot of business books. Most of them aren't worth the paper that they're written on. I think this is the best one because it's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's really, really hard running and building a startup and building a company of any sort. And that book tells it as it is. The advice and management advice it gives, the company advice. I mean, I revert back to that book all the time. It becomes useful in so many situations that we're going through, positive ones and most importantly the negative ones, because like I think he says something along the lines of, there is no company in the history of the world that has had a continuous upwards trajectory. There are always problems. And you need to understand and how to adapt those. So if you're starting a company, and I don't want to put people off it by saying it's horrible and you've got to go through the struggle and the trauma and all of this stuff, you do, but it's worth it. But understanding and getting the knowledge from it. So that is always my recommendation, is The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Well, there you go. The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
I feel like they need to put me on commission because the amount of times I mentioned this.
I was going to say, I was like, that's a little plug.
I drove past him in Palo Alto, Ben Horowitz, and I was really tempted to get out and say, you owe me commission for all the book sales.
You should have done it. You should have done it, because you're probably like a good percentage of it. But there you go. That's fair enough. Go read that book. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Xavier. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been very interesting learning about everything that you do. And we wish you all the best with all of your future companies that you are going to just grow and help succeed. Definitely. Not
Thank
hopefully,
you.
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Vision to Venture. If you're listening, make sure to give us a 5-star review. And if you're watching, like and subscribe to listen to more inspiring stories from leaders in the tech space.